welcome back into the Canadian Fastbreak. This is episode 4, where we are going to be breaking down everything in the CEBL. And this week, we actually have a very special episode where we're going to be going in depth on the Winnipeg Sea Bears, a powerhouse in the West, with lots to talk about, especially with the path to the number 1 seed being right there for the taking, but a lot of question marks. Xavier Moon, what's going on there? But again, they have so much to look forward to. Teddy Allen has been great. They have so many other pieces, but there's still some question marks for me at least, and we are going to dive right into that. But first, we're going to give you guys, obviously, a little bit of a rundown going into the CBL and what happened this week. But let me send it to you first, to my co-host, Jeremy. How was your week, and what stood out to you this week in the CBL? There was lots of exciting stuff again.
Yeah, no, week was great. A lot of good games on the slate as well, too. Had a few important ones. Surge almost got their second win, so that was a tight-knitted one as well for them, but good on them for almost getting it done. The game that stood out on the slate for me was the Edmonton Stingers being on an absolute steam train right now, winning the game 94-93. It was a free throw that sealed the deal. It was the final bucket for the team, but nonetheless, to beat the West, the class of the West, and number 1 seed, that's always big, right?
Yeah, no, it's huge. I mean, for Edmonton, we were talking about them all last week, getting them really hyped up to go into those Mamba games, 2 games we really wanted them to win. They took care of business, and then this was kind of like the harder stretch. They got over that Surge game as well. They're now into the Bandits Sea Bears games where they're going to be huge, especially if they want to, have different seeding position going into the playoffs. And they came out this game firing, and they showed that they can contend with these big name teams. So for Edmonton, I know Gianno's probably happy to see that they are on the top, but they're going to have another big one against the Sea Bears coming up. So don't get too excited yet, but there is so much to look forward to on the Stingers team, and they've really kind of flipped it around, I think, in the past week or so. But again, like you mentioned with that Surge game, that was actually the first game held in Yukon. I forgot to mention that against the Mamba. Really good game. Mamba came out on top. But talking about those Surge, I think, for me at least, it's fair to say that this team has kind of reached the end of the rope for this season already. I know there's still like 10 or so games left, but it kind of seems like too much of a hill to climb to get into the playoffs. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of ruling them out. I know we haven't talked about them too much in the past couple of weeks, but this is the point where I'm going to say they're probably eliminated.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the nicest way to put it, right? Like, we haven't been talking too much about them because, quite honestly, there hasn't been that headline of even the Surge grabbing their second win. The headline has been, are they going to find the next one, So it's not getting old, but it's a matter of fact that the Surge now have more runway behind them than they do forward, right? And so they're playing a game of catch up in the season. So they're not mathematically out yet. You can't count them out yet, but they're either going to need like one good win streak ahead of themselves, or they're going to have to start relying on opponents to lose, and that's a never good position you want the club to be in, right? So I don't know about you. I don't see any trend upwards, and I don't see the West also loosening up.
No, yeah, I think for them at this point, it's just probably just going to be about building towards, next season. You're probably going to want to solidify, a new coaching staff going forward, really get a guy that you believe in. I know you thought you had that with Perry Wong. It didn't work out, but, maybe set some cornerstone pieces going forward. I know that the CBL, it's hard to do that with players, but maybe if you can focus on coaching, that would be great. But yeah, Surge fans, I think we'll see you next season, and hopefully it's a big bounce back year because there was such high expectations this year. So hopefully they can carry through to next season and maybe something different will happen. But looking at a better team with big expectations, the Bandits, they did lose to the Stingers, like you mentioned. What does that loss kind of mean for them, and what kind of questions do we still have with them that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of factors I'll point out, but it's one that I mentioned last week as well, too, on the podcast, right? The Bandits couldn't have been caught off guard with the Stingers, and they had to know going into that game that the Stingers were on a roll, right? That's the thing, and you can't overlook that, and you can't be thinking about what's next. You got to play that game, and the Bandits, they lost. It doesn't matter about if it was 1 point, 2 points. They took that L, but it's about the bounce back. Just like every other game, you know that you're sitting at a comfortable position on top of the West, and yes, you just got you know potentially outbeaten by potential seeding, right? That you're going to face in the playoffs. But there's that, and then there's also some underworks as well too. I want to touch on it briefly. We don't know too much about what's happening still, trying to get some deep dives into it, but Kyle Julius still being out after that suspension. It was ruled 3 games, right? But I just think like the Bandits are working towards championship contention, and not even just as an athlete, but also as a club and organization as a whole, right? You can't focus on championships and playoffs and contention when you have all this rustling of the weeds underneath you, right? It's nonetheless, you can say you're blocking it out, but right, it's still there. And I think that's the problem that the Bandits are maybe facing. There's some noise not even inside the court, which they're used to dealing with. It's that outside noise, and a whole bunch of questions are in the air. Maybe they don't even know the direction that the club is heading towards. They don't know if they have a preliminary coach, stuff like that. So I don't know. It's iffy because they're dealing with that, and then you see on June 20th, it was their first game without Julius, and the Bandits bounced back against the Honey Badgers 102-81 at home, and that was big for them. But it's about continuing that trend without your coach, and it's a successful coach, right? Julius has been amazing, but yeah, it's just. I think it's all the rustling of the weeds underneath the Bandits right now, and I think it might be getting to them, and it's that loss of direction, right?
Yeah, I know it's been such a whirlwind for them over the past few weeks, and they had so many things going right, and it's just kind of all, got thrown in the blender. But hopefully they can figure that out, especially, in the next few weeks, so that we kind of have a more solidified outlook on the team going into the playoffs. I think that would be great, or else it kind of gets a little sketchy because, the Stingers getting that win, they probably feel that they can beat any of these teams, and going into the playoffs, that's kind of scary because they could be a 3-4 seed, but it's not going to matter because they can go and beat the Bandits on any given night, right? So the West is interesting, and there's going to be a lot to talk about, but I think we can kind of wrap it up there with those 4 solidified, probably into the playoffs. It's just going to be about seeding now. And then looking into the East, it's a little bit different. Whereas the bottom teams separated themselves in the West, but in the East, it's easily the first team separating themselves. Scarborough Shooting Stars, 13-2. And it looks like the bottom 4 are really going to have to battle it out to see who gets into the playoffs, right? Brampton got a big win this week, back on the board after losing 5 straight. It might have been 6, actually, 6 straight. They brought in Trenton Flowers and Justin Hamilton, having 2 huge games the other night against the Blackjacks. I think Trenton had 22 points, Justin had 19 and 10, so really big impact right off the hop from the both of them, and I think that's definitely what they wanted, bringing those guys in. Trenton Flowers, G League, I believe NBA experience as well, so he's a guy you can bring in who, is going to be confident in a league like this where not everybody does have NBA experience, and he's playing against guys who, he might have the upper edge on. So that's really good for him. Hamilton as well. He's a guy who can come in here and do exactly what he did. 19 and 10. If you get that on every given night, it's going to be great for the Brampton Honey Badgers. But, with Sean East, he didn't play last game. Still kind of, fighting maybe some injuries there. But once they get this going again, hopefully Brampton can solidify that 2 seed because we know they've deserved it all season long. They've been towards the top. It would just be a shame to see them drop. But moving from Brampton, I want to kind of get your feel on the bottom 3 teams, Montreal, Ottawa, Niagara. To you, did anybody separate themselves this week into maybe, looking like the team that might miss the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, like you see all of them trying to separate themselves from the middle of the pack, right? And Ottawa losing to Brampton 81-76, and then you see just as the time of this recording right now, the Blackjacks are able to bounce back their next game, right? 86-77 against the River Lions, and now they claim a win, right? So I think they're finding that ability to bounce back, but I think all three of them are, right? So in turn, maybe it's going to be a race of, who's messing up first, and maybe it comes down to the most simplest, minimalistic mistakes or of a single game or multiple stretches. But yeah, nonetheless, I don't know. It's tough to really separate themselves right now, and it's only by a matter of 1-2 games at most. And so, I just think as the weeks fold a little bit more into themselves, so will the teams. And I don't know. We just see that separation so much in the West early on, and then the East tightened up, and now we see the West tightening up. And so I'm wondering now if the East is going to do the same thing, right? So I don't know. Out of all those three like clubs, do you see one making it on top of the other three?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of circle back, especially with you just letting me know there that the Blackjacks came ahead, that's Niagara's fifth straight loss. And their back-to-back-to-back campaign is looking a little bit in jeopardy to me. I think they finally got back to 5-5. I believe to start the season they were 1-4. I wouldn't quote me on that, but they got back to 5-5. Now they're 5-10 again. So it's going to be another hill to climb. I think if they can find a way into that top four, that they have the playoff experience, I feel like they'll figure it out. Although it's probably not going to be exactly the same team. If you have Khalil Ahmad there, anything can happen. So I think if they can find their way into the fourth spot, I like their chances to make a little bit of noise over Montreal and Ottawa. Still, even records aside, but yeah, Ottawa. It's just been such a roller coaster with me for them. I've been so high on them going into the season. It was kind of like a flip-flop for me. I love what Javonte Smart and Matthew Cleveland bring. So I'd like to say that I think Ottawa is probably my third over Montreal and Niagara, because I don't love what Montreal has. But Montreal has been proving me wrong all season. So it's hard to go against them as well. But to answer your question, I would say probably Ottawa is my standout of the three. But again, I think right now Niagara's looking like they might miss the playoffs, which is going to be very unfortunate if they do, especially with the back-to-back-to-back campaign. Yeah, it wouldn't be great. But the East is very interesting, as is the West, as is the whole league. But for the rest of this episode, I think we're going to really transition into those Winnipeg Sea Bears. Like I said at the top of the show, there's a lot to talk about there, especially with Xavier Moon still not making his comeback. I want to start there with you and kind of give us the rundown on what's going on with him. Why hasn't he played for these Sea Bears yet?
Yeah, so it's been about 2 weeks, I believe, since he hasn't been in town, or he's been in town, but he hasn't made his debut, right? So yeah, so from my understanding, his Russian team that he's playing with still has his rights. So at the moment, they're currently debating on re-signing him or not. And I think it's like, at this point, it's maybe oddly odd, for lack of a better term, that the Russian team hasn't made that decision yet, considering, he is a contributor in the Canadian Elite Basketball League, right? So I don't know. I think there's some debate, and that's what's honestly keeping him from being out in the paint. And I don't know. I think they could definitely benefit. Nonetheless, he still got so much star power, but they could definitely benefit from the 3-time CEBL Player of the Year.
Yeah. I mean, we've said it all season long that we're looking at the Sea Bears team without even their full potential. And they're going to be bringing a guy, 3-time CEBL Player of the Year. No matter how you put it, he's going to make your team better. So we need to see him back, and we've been saying this all season long, though, so whether it's going to happen or not, it's just going to be very interesting. But we're getting down to the wire where we probably want to see a few games of him with this exact team to really have a lot of confidence going into the playoffs. You don't want to put him in, one game before the playoffs and kind of throw everything you've been building off. You need some time to really get back into your rhythm, get back into your groove. So it'll be interesting because, again, he hasn't played with Teddy Allen yet. He hasn't played with all those guys. So we'll really have to see. But yeah, for Xavier Moon, I hope he comes back, and I hope for Sea Bears fans and the entire league, they need him back. Like, he's the face of this league, honestly. So it'll be huge if they get him back. But, the Sea Bears 9-5. There's still a lot to love, still a lot to look forward to, and like I said at the top of the show again, that first seed is within reach, and they're going to want to have that, right? Because that could be the difference in you playing a team like, whether you'd rather play either of them, that's to be said, but Stingers or Mamba, you really kind of want to have the option to get that fourth place team, because I feel like one of those two will fizzle out and separate themselves into more of a fourth place. But that's a question for another day. However, looking around the Sea Bears team, besides a guy who's not even played for them so far, Teddy Allen, definitely an MVP candidate for sure in this league so far, but he has pretty much put this team on his back to get him to this point, I feel.
Yep.
In terms of Teddy Allen, do you think he is the MVP of the league so far, and has his contributions to the team really been the driving factor of why they're first in the league?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to overlook someone like that, league leader in points as well too. So he's doing obvious stuff right all the time, right? But yeah, I don't know. I definitely think that there's other contenders in the conversation, but it's Teddy Allen that's been able to prove that he's almost on top of the conversation. He's been the talk of the town. So again, you can spit out all of his stats, all of his league record leads that he has at the moment, right? But it's really all about watching his game, and not even just how he's able to score, but how he's able to set up his teammates. And one of those other individuals too, who we'll talk about briefly, is Isaiah Osborne, right? Made the debut with the Winnipeg Sea Bears, 24 points, game-winning shot in target score time, 5 steals. Like, this guy was incredible, and just like, it's a plug-and-play player. That's the best way to describe it. He didn't take any time to warm up, match anyone's chemistry. They knew that he was able to get slotted into the roster and make improvements instantly, and that's what he was able to prove that he could do, right? So those are the guys that is exhibit A on why Winnipeg is so deep, right? And there's a couple of other players that stand out exactly like that too.
Yeah, like you said with Osborne, I'm glad you brought him up. He looked great so far for the Sea Bears team, and he's kind of a guy that can, just shoot the 3-ball. He's got a very smooth stroke. He can kind of get you a bucket when you need. And I think probably one of the biggest things that stood out to me when watching the film here is that he kind of gives out the same calm, cool collectedness that Teddy Allen gives off. And I think the two of them playing together, it just makes them even more calm, and it makes them even feel like they can just go out there, have the ball, do their thing, get shots up, and it's just so effortless. To me, these two guys playing off each other, it's shown that it works really well for sure. But yeah, like I said, these are two guys that are scorers, and I think this Sea Bears team has a lot of those guys who are scorers. Even looking at Trey McGowan's a fringe NBA guy, spent so much time in the G League. Again, he's a guy who can get a bucket for you as well, and he's shown that. So they have so many guys who can just score, and that's great. And I mean, it looks like they can all play defense as well, especially Teddy Allen has shown a lot of defensive prowess while being the leading offensive guy as well. So I think there's something to be said there. But looking at a different side of the ball, one thing that stood out to me was the rebounding on this team. So I'm going to kind of list off the players here, and this is what's kind of stood out to me. I'm going to list off their heights, right? Teddy Allen, 6'6". You're looking at Acott, 6'6". McGowan, 6'4". Trayvon Scott, another guy who's been a really great scorer for them, but he's 6'8". He's been a great rebounder, leading rebounder. And then you have Isaiah Osborne, 6'5". Tillman, 6'8". And then Hildebrandt, 6'9". Those are all the guys who kind of play, bigger minutes, like 15-plus minutes a game for them. None of those heights really stand out to me, and that's kind of interesting because they've been lacking a little bit of rebounding. Actually, I think I said Scott was the leading rebounder. I was wrong. Teddy Allen is the leading rebounder. That's kind of a big issue to me. I don't know if you necessarily want Teddy Allen to be the guy leading your rebounding charge. I think having your big scorer, and Teddy Allen plays as a guard. He shouldn't be getting all those rebounds all the time, especially if he's putting up the shots, going to get his own rebounds, or even on the defensive side getting those rebounds. You need to have more of a big man presence. I feel that could be one thing that's lacking, especially come playoff time. Maybe that could be exposed a little bit. I don't know. It's just something that stood out to me. But again, I'm kind of picking at straws here with this Sea Bears team because they've been so good. But to my point there, does that stand out to you a little bit? Does the rebounding maybe scare you a bit?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of works as like a system gear, right? So Teddy Allen's forced to, grab maybe more rebounds and make that effort more than he should. And in turn, that, struggles and puts a toll on the transition phase, right? When you're trying to get that ball back up to the court, right? And I think, Teddy Allen, if he's able to maybe get 2, 3 rebounds less in a game or attempts to get a rebound in a game, that's conserved energy, right? And that could be the extra strides that he needs to bring that up court, and get the winning basket. It's far-fetched theory, but you understand the point. And
Yeah.
it's just, again, it's just all works as a gear and as a system. And if they're able to ease off the pressures on one end of the pressure plate, then another side's going to lift up, and that side will be Teddy Allen, and the team collectively can further elevate his game.
Yeah, exactly. That was very much so the point I wanted you to bring up, and I think that's the big thing: conserving his energy, saving him for the moments that we need him, especially in the target score time, which is the biggest part of the CBL. It's not like you have the lead, you can kind of play around with it, take your time. You got to go out in there and get it, and you got to win the game for yourself. So, looking more at the depth on this team, the 3-point shooting. Like we mentioned, Osborne leads his team in 3 points attempt per game. He's sitting around 8, right? And his percentage is pretty close to the best on this team. They have a lot of shooters. Hildebrandt was a guy who, going into the season, I was really high on. I watched him back in college, and he's always kind of been that shooter, that presence where he starts the games for the Sea Bears. He doesn't necessarily play the most minutes, but he goes out there start of the game, makes an impact and plays when necessary. So, my point here is just they have so much depth, so many guys who can come on here, score at any given point. But looking at the Sea Bears team, is there anything to you that, in terms of the Bandits, sticks out, and what's kind of maybe lacking on the Sea Bears side that the Bandits have the advantage of?
That's a good one. I'll spin the tables first because it's been truly noted every single time the Sea Bears have played the Bandits that the Sea Bears have the size and the physicality against the Bandits, right? And they have, I guess they have the star power, as do the Bandits, but I think in turn that the Sea Bears potentially, I don't want to say that they do, but they do potentially rely on Teddy Allen, and it says it in the stats as well too. So if there's that reliance on star power for the club, then you take away Teddy Allen for X amount of times, right? And the team's got to adjust majorly, and that it's just a statement of fact, right? And I think Vancouver's been put in so many positions so far this season where they've been forced to make roster adjustments or chemistry adjustment, play adjustments, whatever you want to call them. And I think that's maybe where they would have the upper hand on the Sea Bears. It's just like a fast-changing game, fast-changing league, right? And I think that the Bandits have been more prone to seeing that kind of side, whereas the Sea Bears, I don't want to say carried by Teddy Allen, but he's definitely, the major contributor for the Sea Bears team.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's something that hopefully maybe Moon can come back and relieve some of that pressure, right? But right now, he's had to do it all season long. I don't think he minds doing it. I think he enjoys it, right? But it's something where, maybe down the line he runs out of gas a little bit. Who knows? But it's a long way to go still, right? I know we're kind of flying through the season, but we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty. The games are going to get tighter. It's going to be a lot more energy, exerted. So it'll be interesting for sure. But yeah, like you're saying there, I think that could be a concern going down the line. But looking at the Bandits again, it's like Samuel, it was House, it was Creek, there's still questions there. So there's definitely, there was a lot of, firepower to go around there, and guys who on any given night could, bring out certain stat lines, bring out, clutch performances. I think that's still there with the Sea Bears, right? I think, like we saw with Osborne, he had that 24-point game, clutch and target score time. Like he can, when needed, do that, right? And I think same thing with McGowan's. When he needs to, he can do that. So I think they have the depth. Obviously, Teddy Allen is still their main guy, but I think we'll probably have to see more of that being proved, whether these other guys can step up down the line. But to kind of answer your question, I think it's definitely there, and I think it's shouldn't be too much of a worry, hopefully. But yeah, in terms of the Bandits, again, I'm going to swing it back to you. Is there any other like keys? Do you think these last two games that they have left together could be the difference between that first seed?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. I mean, either way, if you're coming out one or second seed, right, you're still going to have the 5,000 fans behind you on home court, and that's
Yeah.
always something that you want, right, rather than sitting at third and fourth and having to make the travel. Um, but yeah, it's just I don't know. It's the Bandits. I feel like they coming off of a loss. They have two games against the Surge,
Yeah.
and that's definitely an opportunity to find that rollback, I guess, in their season. But um, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, facing off against the Sea Bears is no either easy feat. I'm not too sure if they have a home game or it's an away game against each other. I'm just trying to scroll through the schedule really quickly here,
Yeah, I
but
think it's
I think the Bandits play first July 23rd against the Sea Bears, and that's going to be a home game for the Sea Bears. So, yeah, it's never fun walking into Canada Life Center and middle of the week too, trying to take something away from the Sea Bears home court, right?
yeah.
But it's absolutely detrimental for either club to try to get both wins out of the two game series that's left in between them, right? That's the difference maker. That's the splinter that's going to drive a wedge in between that some and create some space right in between the standings. So, regardless of who's first and second seed, right, that you're not going to be playing each other first round of the playoffs. But let's say one team does end up slipping into third seed, then that's the difference between again home court and 5,000 fans standing behind you. And I don't know about you, but I definitely want 5,000 fans screaming and supporting the club behind me while I'm on that court.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what's really interesting is that final game, right? The final game, August 2nd, is going to be Bandits Sea Bears to end the season. So if somehow, some way, that comes down to being the difference between first and second, again, like you said, it's probably not that big of a difference. I know you're both getting, home court. The only real big difference, I think, is obviously who could be that third, fourth seed. We'll kind of see, and who you'd rather play. But still, I think that would be an electric game, especially. It'd kind of be like a playoff, probably conference final preview, right? So we will have to see. I think that's going to be very interesting. But again, moving towards the end of this episode and the end of this breakdown, sticking with that, what does the Sea Bears need to do to solidify top two? I know we're kind of looking at top one there, but how do we kind of solidify top two? I know at the start of the episode, we talked about how it's pretty much a 4-team battle and it's pretty close. So what are some keys that they need to do to solidify that top two and not slip?
Yeah, I think it's the common theme of not leaning too much on your star talent, and that's Teddy Allen, Isaiah Osborne, and defense wins championships. And I guess the Sea Bears, they have proven that that's what they have on the roster, and I just think that the Sea Bears, it's interesting. I'm coming to a blank here, but I'm trying to pull up the schedule as well too. But the Sea Bears, they have the physicality, but it's also about the rebound control too.
Yeah.
Just like we alluded towards too, they have to get it off the glass and find that transition phase. Their transition phase hasn't looked like it's been lacking as well too, right? They've gotten those pieces onto the court, but it's about easing the pressures on your star players, and defense wins championships, like I said, and it's also about just relieving the pressure from your star players. That's one of the biggest things in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, defense wins championships. The 9.3 steals per game leads the league, and it leads the league by over one steal. So I think that's pretty big for them, and it shows, like you said, that they are a defensive team as much as they have so much scoring presence. So Sea Bears definitely a team to be reckoned with, and we know that. We've been knowing that since pretty much the first week. I know there was kind of some questions of what was the Sea Bears team really going to be going into the season? They proved it right off the get-go. I know Giano made the biggest hot take going in off on the national rundown that the Sea Bears were going to win the championship, and we're going to see if that's really going to come to fruition, which kind of leads me into my final thing here. We're going to leave this episode with some predictions for the Sea Bears going into the rest of the season and the playoffs. So, Jeremy, kind of hit me with two things. This is a two-parter. Do you think the Sea Bears will finish first in the West, and do you think the Sea Bears will win the championship this year?
Yeah, I'm actually just refreshing the CEBL page, and as of right now, the Winnipeg Sea Bears sitting exactly like same identical record as the Bandits, but they actually are positioned as first seed. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's interesting, but I don't know if that's alphabetical order or not.
I think it could be just based on point differential because they have like an over 80 plus difference on the Bandits. So
Oh, okay, yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
if that's maybe it, or maybe it's a head to head thing, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, no, to answer your question, I forgot the second one already, but the first one, definitely that fight between first and second seed. I believe that's what it was.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
first
that's
part,
gonna
who
be
will finish first? Second part, do you think they win the championship? Maybe give me like a sort of odds breakdown of percentage wise of them winning the championship.
okay. Yeah, yeah. I think as of right now, with Vancouver on the trend down, it's hard not to look away at Winnipeg, right? So I don't know. As maybe as a homer, I'd say Vancouver Bandits, right? But Winnipeg, yeah, especially if they're able to add Moon to the roster, I think that there's a high chance that they're able to grab that first seed. And I think against the Bandits, it's slowly slipping away from 50-50 to, maybe right now I'd say Winnipeg's up 60-40. It's kind of at that point. But again, we've seen the scales tilt all season back and forth like that each week. But yeah, I think that they would get that first seed. But championship wise, I don't know. It's so hard to say. Like,
It
I
is.
don't. I kind of don't want to put my money where my mouth is at the end of the season after saying the Vancouver Bandits are gonna win. It's
Yeah.
so hard, especially with the West tightening up right now. The Stingers on an absolute like roll right now. Mamba as well. Last week we just saw them do that, and they're trying to continue that trend. It's only the Surge that are basically out of the question, as we mentioned earlier. But I don't know. Coming out of the West, yeah, I have to say Sea Bears.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I think looking at their schedule, right? They have their next two games against the Stingers. That seems pretty big. Then you have Surge, Mamba, Surge, Alliance, and then it's Bandits, Honey Badgers, Blackjacks, Bandits. So it's kind of an interesting stretch. You go with, three West teams in your next five games. Two of those against the Surge, you should win those. So I think they can increase their gap from first within this next week or two, especially if you steal. Even if you get at least one against the Stingers, I think you're looking good. You could probably get that Mamba game, right? And then Alliance you should have. Then it gets down to those two Bandits games, the Honey Badgers, depending on what they look like there. Same with the Blackjacks. It could be interesting, but I think the Winnipeg Sea Bears got to be. I know you said 60-40. For me, it's probably like 70-30 right now. I think it's a really, really good chance. Just looking schedule-wise, I like what they have. But as for the championship for me, it's so tough because each week I'm almost like switching my pick, right? But I don't know if I want to put over 50% chance on the Sea Bears team to win the championship yet because I really do like what Scarborough has out there. I like the wild card potential with either of the third or fourth teams in the respective conferences. So it's going to be so different. I think come playoff time, I think we're going to see probably like a really big upset at some point. I don't know where it will be, but I would say championship wise, Sea Bears right now for me, it's probably looking at a third. I'm saying like 33%. So I think that's kind of where I'll set that at. If you want to throw me, maybe like, would you say higher or lower than that for you?
Uh, for Sea Bears specifically,
Yeah, to win the championship.
yeah, yeah. I'll agree with you there. I'd say 30%, 33. I
Yeah,
think anything past 40 maybe would be a little bit pushing it. You still got Scarborough number one in the league, right? That's the standard. That's a measuring stick at the moment, and then Brampton's following with Bandits, just a game behind. So it's just, yeah, it's a little bit hard to kind of offset and set the percentages on the other teams as well too. But I definitely think the Sea Bears, yeah, I'd say 30%, 40% maybe
Yeah.
generous.
I mean, I think to kind of wrap this up, some key things to take away here. Big dependency on Moon, right? Big dependency on if Teddy Allen can keep carrying this load. The defense, I think we're great there. I don't think we got to worry too much. I think rebounding is probably one of those big things for me. But seeding wise, I think if getting that first place will be a really big thing for them going forward. But yeah, that's going to kind of wrap it up there. I think we did a great job kind of breaking down, the players, the depth, and really the big question mark with Xavier Moon. But Teddy Allen, MVP candidate, and these Sea Bears are going to be a force to be reckoned with going into the rest of the season and the playoffs. So make sure you guys, stay tuned, looking at the Sea Bears season all season long, watching all their games, really getting excited for what's going to come down the stretch. There's going to be so many games, so many storylines. But once again, this has been Brady Locke and Jeremy Russo. Come back next week. We're probably going to be breaking down another really interesting team, and there's going to be lots of questions. So we will see you later this week on the National Rundown, the North of the End Zone. But we will see you next week, Jeremy, and make sure you all enjoy the rest of your week and all these games. Peace.
See you next time.